Hello and welcome to StoryDev. My name is Luke, also known as TNRE, and welcome to another episode of Story Creator. In this episode, we will discuss how we are to start generating forms. This is a two-part video just due to the sheer amount of work required to implement form generation, but we will get there. So the first thing we need to do is actually create form components. So the first thing that we're doing here is actually generating a form component for text input. This is a single line text. So we're just adding two panels here, followed by a label. This is going to be a middle left aligned label, followed by the actual text box component itself. Here we're going to create an interface called iFormComponents. We're going to need a few properties and methods here. So one of them is going to be string display value, and the other is an object actually returning the value. So in here we're going to basically give us the ability to set our display name and value. This interface will come in handy later. Need to cast there to make sure that we actually assign the correct type to the text field there. Property, I should say. Next we're going to create a multi-line text field, or text box. Going to copy the same components, or almost entirely the same components over. This time around though, we're actually going to align the text there to the top, and we're going to make this text box multi-line, of course. Once again, this is going to implement iForm interface. We're going to implement those, and we're just going to basically be doing the same thing for this component as well. Once again, display name and value for the text box. The component we're going to do is a drop down. So we'll have eventually the ability to assign the actual items or the data source to this drop down, but for the time being we are simply just going to implement a basic drop down there. I actually looked at some old code because it was curious that I'm kind of repeating myself, but the main reason why those two things are going to be different in the end is because one of them is of course implementing our iForm component, and the other part of that code is for the filters for the search functionality that exists within StoryDev. Of course we haven't actually seen that yet, and that's primarily due to the fact that that's fairly old code. We haven't been able to take advantage of that, but we will do when actually searching data that we are able to use and generate with this code. Once again, generating a form date time. This is of course going to include a date time picker, again implementing our iForm component. And of course we'll do the same thing as we did in the last few components. Display name once again, object once again will return the value of the date time picker, and set as well. Next one is of course form number, so we'll have a numeric up down here. Again, just copying some components over, and our numeric up down, just dragging that in, modifying some properties here, make sure it all fits and aligns properly. This is fairly basic stuff here. So yeah, of course, once again, just do an iForm component. The basic reason why we're doing all of this instead of, say, creating these controls programmatically is simply due to the fact that if we've already got the types known at compile time, then it's just more convenient to create the user components as we design them, instead of trying to do it all from programming, and it just makes the program a bit cleaner as well. Here we're trying form array. We didn't actually implement this fully. We will probably implement it properly at a later time. But here we're going to add a couple of panels. Here is going to be our field value, or field name, I should say. Add a couple more panels here as well. This one's going to be the results. And of course we need to actually display a result for the array. So the concept here is to allow for the ability to either delete or edit an item within that array, and then all we've got here is just simply a display or label that basically describes the item in that array. So once again we implement iForm component, but we don't actually implement anything much further than that because we just want to test the basics. We'll get onto this a bit later, like I said. We get our result here, for example, and we just implement, we just say get result for our object value, and once again for the set result as well. Make sure to cast that to an object array. And this is of course to do, we're not actually going to implement this immediately. So we're going to start now actually generating the data forms. So we're going to set up some private member variables. So we've got data forms as a dictionary and our currently used form. Scrolling down here, we're going to find an appropriate place to start implementing our data forms API. So we say begin form. Eventually I opt to just simply say create form, but we'll go with begin form for the time being. So we need to create a new form with the title that we give it. I'm trying to work out the default location. So here we are, start position, which we want in the center of the screen initially. We're just going to add that along with the title to the current form, and we're going to get the reference to that element from our dictionary that we just added to. And here I'm thinking maybe I don't want to do this, just say create form. Another method I add is sync field. So the idea behind sync field is to simply say what is the field name of the actual field that we want to sync with in our previously created structure, what's going to be the display name for that, and also how is it going to be displayed. So first of all, we double check to see if our current form has been assigned. If it hasn't, then give us back an error. We don't have a convenient method to submit a validation error, so we do quickly just that. What I try here is creating this validation error, which is going to inherit from script error, but eventually I decide against this and just use the script error class directly. And we just create a type, some error type, so whether it's standard or validation. Maybe there's some additional types we add later, but that's what we're going to keep to for now. So up here that's going to be standard error, here is going to be a validation error. Fortunately at the moment there's no possible way of retrieving line number or columns. I attempt this by using a separate list, errors for throw. So we add that error that we've just created for errors for throw, which I somehow managed to misspell. And here we're saying within sync field, if this function is being used without first calling create form, hence why our current form might be null, then we submit that error. Scroll back up here and we take a look at errors for throw. Of course we can't use throw directly, so we attempt throw new exception, and I do kind of look this up to see whether or not it would be worth looking at it. So I do look this up, check it out. Eventually I take a look at some more options because I couldn't find anything that was really necessary or appropriate for my particular problem here. So I try this, I go and iterate through each of the errors for throw. Realize it's not going to work, so eventually I just consider adding the error just to the standard errors for the time being. The standard errors list that we've got instead of errors for throw. Here we want to check our last used structure, and again, if a data structure hasn't been created, then this isn't going to work. I mean, it wouldn't even work for create form, which we should actually guard against as well. Here we set currently executing file path so that we can actually at least give a little bit more information to our errors if we're not going to be presenting column lines or columns. So we do that real quick. Here we get our field by name using our last used structure and the field name that we pass into our sync field. As long as that isn't null, we can proceed. And here we want to check all of our types. And I realize after creating this, I forgot to actually implement the checkbox functionality. So we just add that real quick. iForm component, implement that once again. For our display name and our value, once again fairly simple. Just get our checked value and set it as well to a boolean. And we use it in this context. Here I'm just wondering how I actually want to create this. So I try using iForm component because of course form checkbox is in fact an iForm component, so we can do that. But I realize actually I need to access the rule component, the actual control within form checkbox eventually, so I just create var for that. Like that. As well as being able to of course dock that to the top. We also do set child index. The main reason why is because the way in which layouts work in Winforms is it's when you add a component to a form, it will and you've got assigned say top. Every single component that you add, the last added components will in fact be displayed at the top of the screen because that was the last component that was assigned to doc style top. So in order to avoid that, you can in fact use the set child index method of that control collection, and that will fix that issue. And it will display in the order in which you actually add the components. Here once again, we're going to use the same for date picker. We're going to create our form date time, and here we're going to use the date custom format for depending on the field display value that we're using for the field. Here I am trying to find it. I eventually find the functionality, set a default of course, while I'm here. And we're going to set the custom formats for depending on our field display. Add that once again to our current form, set the child to 0. And last but by no means least, at least for this video, we're just going to set the padding for our current form. And that is going to be it for this video. So, thank you for watching. In the next episode, we will continue our form generation capabilities and present results on the screen. And until then, once again, thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.